what happens when you tell the narcissist he is an abuser. Next to nobody knows that they have been ensnared by a narcissist the first time that it happens. Indeed, in some cases, the victim has no awareness until the second, third, or even fourth occasion when this happens. The awakening moment usually occurs post-escape, or more usually post-disengagement. This means that the opportunity to express this newfound knowledge is reduced, either because you are now maintaining no contact, or the narcissist has disappeared, for the time being, with a new victim in his or her grip. Accordingly, the opportunity to confront the narcissist to tell them that he or she is a narcissist is reduced. And I have spoken separately about what the resultant effect is where you declare, no, you are the narcissist. What is more likely to happen is that the victim recognizes that they are being abused, or, if they do not use that word, they do at least realize that the way they are being treated is a way which is wrong, unpleasant, or disrespectful. There are, of course, a whole host of reasons why the victim may fail to recognize what is happening to them, and indeed act on any awareness that does occur, but these are points that are to be addressed in a separate article. If you realize that you are being abused, what will happen when you turn to the abusive narcissist and tell them that he or she is an abuser, and that they are engaging in abusive behavior with you? First of all, the lesser narcissist. The lesser narcissist will not deny the behavior that you complain of. The lesser tends to use physical violence, sexual violence, verbal violence, and property destruction as the main methods of implementing abuse and exerting control. This is because the lesser operates in a rudimentary fashion through the sudden explosion of heated fury. Make a point to a lesser that he or she does not like. You can expect, as a minimum, to be treated to the eloquent response of "fuck off," a punch to the face, or quite possibly both. Unrefined, vulgar, and crass, the response of the lesser to being wounded or the need to exert control is to lash out in a bullying and obvious manner. Should you tell a lesser narcissist that he or she is an abuser, you will generate two responses which are similar in nature. If you make this allegation in a neutral manner, thus free of fuel, it will wound the lesser, because he realizes that it is critical of his behavior, and therefore this wounding will result in an ignition of fury. Thus heated fury follows, and you will find yourself on the receiving end of the types of violence which I have just described. More likely, when you tell the lesser narcissist that he is an abuser, you will do so in a way which provides challenge fuel. You will probably be upset, hurt, frustrated, or angry when you level this accusation at the lesser narcissist. This means you are providing fuel. Nevertheless, the lesser narcissist will interpret your allegation as one which is challenging his or her entitlement to treat you precisely as he or she sees fit. Remember, in our eyes, you are an object, a possession, and we are entitled to treat you as we want. Do not forget that we have a huge need to control, and abuse is a significant method of control. Again, in our world, the need to maintain control and the fact that abuse facilitates control results in its validation. Finally, add into the mix that the lesser has no empathy whatsoever. Your challenging of our perceived right, the challenge to our entitlement, the paranoia-stoked rebellion to our necessary control, means that if you scream at the lesser narcissist that he is a hateful, abusive bastard, this means you issue challenge fuel. His response will be, A, he instinctively recognizes there is more fuel to be obtained here, and therefore the simplest way to gather that precious fuel is to provoke you. And B, you are challenging his authority, his superiority, and your insurrection must be quashed. Since the lesser operates in a rudimentary fashion, his or her response will be to give you another dose of the abusive behavior to get you back into line. The lesser never explains, never justifies. He or she just does, because he or she is entitled to do this. And if you do not like it, tough shit. In the same way that a lesser will state an opinion, and all who disagree are automatically labelled as idiots and morons without explaining why that is the case, the lesser responds in an automatic and knee-jerk manner, based on their unwavering belief that they are right and entitled. The lesser does not recognize that this behavior is wrong. It is your fault. You deserve this behavior. He or she cannot empathize with your pain and hurt. Instead, he or she will only see the need to increase it in order to exert control and gain more fuel. The lesser does not actually address the allegation in any way which you recognize as dealing with it, but instead will launch a verbal attack against you to deflect from your allegation, to put you in your place and to increase your misery. A fist will be driven into your face, or you will be shoved to the floor and given 2 swift kicks. You ought to know your place, and that is one of submission. If you tell a lesser narcissist that he or she is an abuser, expect an aggressive response designed to quell your rebellious accusation. The mid-range narcissist will adopt a defensive response to any accusation of him or her being an abuser. Just like the lesser, the manner in which you make the allegation will either cause wounding or, more often, the provision of challenge fuel. Being far more passive-aggressive in nature, the mid-range narcissist will not lash out with a more of the same is good for you attitude that the lesser adopts, but rather they will continue the abusive behavior through defending their reputation and justifying their behavior. This operates as follows. 1. I am not an abuser. How can you say that? The mid-range narcissist believes that he or she is a decent person. That is their true perspective, and therefore it just does not compute that they could be labelled as an abuser because it does not accord with their own view of themselves. There is no insight. Further, not only has the comment offended their view of themselves, but it also offends their view that they have always been good to you. When you are asked, how can you say that? 2. I know you get upset with me at times, but that is because you overreact. The key response of the mid-range narcissist to being accused of abusive behavior is to automatically blame shift. Notice how they do not deny that the act has happened, but rather it is your response which is the key to the mid-ranger being able to avoid any culpability. It is again your fault. Whereas the lesser lets you know that it is your fault, just because it is, the mid-ranger will at least tell you why it is your fault. You are too sensitive. You take too much to heart. Don't be silly. You read too much into things. Thus, the narcissist dilutes the effect of the behavior by suggesting it is the perspective of the victim which is the problem, and not the narcissist. 3. If the mid-range narcissist does not suggest that it is the perspective of the victim that is the issue, then they will blame shift in a further way by glossing over the abusive behavior and instead focusing on the victim as being the catalyst for the abuse, and therefore it cannot be the fault of the mid-ranger. He or she does not necessarily deny that the behavior has taken place, but their automatic need to maintain the upper hand means that their perspective ensures that the victim is the one who is blamed. Accordingly, I know you get upset when I do not speak to you, but if you let me have some peace and quiet, rather than nagging me all of the time, I would not have to do it. I slapped you because you were out of order, shouting at me the way you did. That is no way to talk to your husband. 4. The mid-ranger also deflects by ignoring the abusive behavior, again, not actually denying that it has taken place, but removes any validity of the accusation by deflecting, and does so by pointing out all of the good things that the mid-ranger does for the victim. There is also a good dose of projection in these responses too. I cannot believe you pick on one minor incident where I lost my temper after all of the things that I have done for you recently. I find it a bit much for you to accuse me of such behaviour when I have been working my nuts off to provide for this household. That really is not fair. Do you know how much pressure I have been under as of late? I said those things because they are true, and you don't appreciate anything I do for you, nothing at all. You always seize on the one thing which I apparently do wrong, and castigate me for it, whilst you ignore all of the really good things that I do. How is that fair? 5. The false mea culpa. The mid-range narcissist may well acknowledge that what they have done is unpleasant and hurtful, and rather than blame shift onto the victim as described above, they transfer culpability to something else. I don't know what came over me. I think someone must have spiked my drink. I have no idea why I did that. It must be all the pressure I am under at work. That's not me that does that. It's like there is some demon or something which takes over from time to time. I think I need some help. Will you help me? I know there is something wrong with me. I just cannot help it. It isn't the real me. I want to stop it. I will see someone about it, and together we can conquer it. Notice how there is no accountability. It is some other force or event which has caused the aberrant behaviour. The mid-range narcissist also deflects from what they have done by making it all about them in terms of them being a tortured soul, needing help, needing the support of the victim, etc. This apparent contrition not only regularly cons the victim, because it is not genuine, but is just a further manipulation, but it also results in plenty fuel for the mid-range narcissist as he is fussed over by the victim and third parties. The bottom line with the mid-range narcissist is that they will never accept that they are an abuser. They are not programmed to do so. They have no emotional empathy. They might understand how their conduct is considered as wrong by you and other people because of their increased cognitive function, but their disorder will not allow them to accept accountability for it. If they did, they would lose control and lose fuel, and therefore they are automatically conditioned to reject any suggestion of culpability or accountability for the abuse. The victim will be suckered into thinking either it is their fault, they overreacted, they have been getting on the mid-ranger's back more recently, yes, with justification, but they are dissuaded from seeing it that way, or that the mid-range narcissist recognizes and accepts they have abused the victim. Typically, rather than get away having apparently secured the truth, as a truth seeker, the victim stays in the hope of securing the healing of the abuser, which they long for, alongside all of the other reasons why a victim remains with an abusive narcissist. The mid-range narcissist will maintain the facade that he or she is a good person, blame shift, and then, if necessary, create waves of sympathy for their behaviour, while still not accepting they are to blame for it. The greater narcissist knows the behaviour is abusive and sees it as entirely necessary to the fulfilment of his or her aims, namely control and the prime aims. The greater narcissist, also lacking emotional empathy, guilt, or remorse, sees what they do as a necessary function. The greater narcissist knows what they are doing, but the overriding need for control and superiority means that it is entirely acceptable to abuse. Of course, the aware greater narcissist recognizes that to make such an admission to the victim is a foolish one, as this would cede control to the victim, something which must not happen. The greater narcissist adopts a triumvirate approach to any allegation that he or she is an abuser. 1. Total rejection. 2. Misperception. 3. Threat. Through total rejection, the greater narcissist will just dismiss the allegation. Able to control his or her ignited fury with a far greater degree of control, the glacial greater will just wave a hand and tell the victim, "That's not abuse. Punching somebody is abuse. What I did is not abuse. Don't be so silly. I do not abuse you. Does an abuser take someone to the premiere of the new Bond movie and the after-performance party? No, they do not. The greater is able to do this because he or she controls their ignited fury, the fact that they speak and operate with a supreme confidence and conviction, and because the nature of the abuse doled out by the greater is done in such a calculated, insidious, and mind-fucking manner that the victim, with eroded self-worth and reduced critical thinking, is easily led to the conclusion that it cannot be abuse. The greater acts with considerable plausible deniability. There are no marks from the kick to the lower back that a lesser would leave, no fingertip bruising from the mid-range, hand about the neck, no witnesses, no observers, no evidence, your word versus ours. Misperception is also used. Greaters enjoy gaslighting you as the finesse and skill required appeals to our more supposedly sophisticated approach to abuse. Of course, whilst we see this as an almost noble way to abuse you, it remains abuse nevertheless. Don't be silly, darling. That never happened. We must get you back to the doctors. You are hallucinating again. I told you not to mix that medication and vodka. See what it has done? It has you thinking horrible things about you and me. Events never happened. Actions have been perceived by you inaccurately. Throw in the game-playing of our coterie and our lieutenants, and you will find yourself in a dizzying and disorientating nightmare, where the abuse never did happen, because of your mistaken perception. Finally, threat will be used. Here, the ever-confident greater will admit that the abuse has happened, but makes it very clear, with an accompanying reptilian smile, that if you ever breathe a word of it to anybody else, then the resulting repercussions will be 100 times worse than what you have experienced before. The jet-black eyes fixed on you, and the steady delivery of such a threat readily convinces you that this is the case. Having experienced the abuse, and also being well aware of what the greater is capable of, the greater's admission gets you no further forward. Instead, you may think you have gained some power through achieving this admission, but you actually have a sword of Damocles hanging over your head now, reminding you of the threat attached to acquiring this power. In reality, it is not power at all. With regard to the issue of abuse, it is pointless to try and gain acknowledgement from the abuser. You will not receive validation, and instead you will face further abuse and manipulation. If you require validation as to what is happening to you, rely on your gut instinct, and also read Manipulated, Devil's Toolkit, and Black Flag, as within those pages you will find all the confirmation you require, which will then give you the logic and understanding to move to the next stage of countering and escaping that abuse.